You know, for centuries, the art of making molecules has looked, well, a lot like cooking. You take your ingredients, you dump them in a big pot, you stir, and you kind of hope for the best. But what if we could transform that ancient cauldron into something more like a computer chip? Something precise, controlled, and just incredibly powerful. Well, today, we're diving into the flow chemistry revolution. It's a fundamental shift in how we create everything from life-saving medicines to the advanced materials that build our future.
Okay, so at its heart, this is really a tale of two completely different philosophies. On one side, you've got traditional batch chemistry. Think of it like making a giant pot of soup. Everything gets tossed in all at once. But on the other side, we have flow chemistry, which is way more like a sophisticated assembly line, where everything happens in a continuous moving stream. And you know what? This one change, from a pot to a pipe, solves a whole bunch of problems that have been bugging chemists for decades.
So let's talk about that old way of doing things. For the longest time, batch processing was it. It was the only way. Didn't matter if you were using a small flask in a lab or a massive industrial reactor, the principle was always the same. Everything happens in one big, static container. And hey, this method built our modern world, no doubt. But it has some pretty serious limitations, especially when reactions get tricky or you need to make a whole lot of something.
Think about stirring a huge pot of gravy. It's almost impossible to get it perfectly smooth, right? You always end up with lumps here and burnt spots on the bottom there. Well, the exact same thing happens in a giant chemical reactor. You get poor mixing and uneven temperatures, and that leads to unwanted side products and results that are just all over the place. And if your reaction is, say, explosive or uses hazardous materials, having it all in one giant tank is basically a recipe for disaster. Scaling up just means building an even bigger, more dangerous pot.
And this is where flow chemistry just waltzes in and changes the game. Instead of one big pot, imagine your entire reaction happening inside a tiny little tube or a pipe. Your starting materials, the reagents, they're continuously pumped in at one end, they react as they flow through this pipe, and the finished product just streams out the other end. It's this elegant assembly line approach to building molecules that fixes almost all the problems of that big pot.
A basic flow setup is actually beautifully simple. First up, you've got pumps that act like incredibly precise squirt guns, feeding the reactants into the system. They meet up at a mixer, and then they travel through the reactor, which is often just a coil of tubing, and that's where the magic happens. A pressure regulator keeps everything nice and controlled, and then finally, the pure product gets collected at the end. It's a journey for molecules, and it's guided and controlled at every single step.
So what happens when you make that switch from a pot to a pipe? Well, you unlock some incredible chemical superpowers. And I'm not talking about a minor improvement here. This fundamentally changes what is even possible, both in a research lab and on a factory floor.
The first, and you could argue the most important advantage, is near-perfect mixing. I mean, think about it. Because the reactants are flowing through these tiny channels, sometimes less than a millimeter wide, they literally have nowhere to hide. They are forced together intimately and instantly. That's something that is just physically impossible in a big sloshing flask.
Now, the technical term for this is mass transfer. But don't let the jargon scare you. All it really means is how quickly the reactants can find each other. In a big batch reactor, they have to slowly float around. But in a flow reactor, the distances are so small that it happens almost instantaneously. And what does that mean for us? It means faster reactions, better yields, and fewer unwanted side products. It is a complete game changer.
So what does this incredible level of control actually let you do? Well, researchers have developed something called flash chemistry, where reactions happen in milliseconds. This quote here gets at the heart of it. Basically, chemists could mix two chemicals so fast that they reacted with each other before one of them had a chance to react with itself. That was just impossible in a slow, clunky batch reactor, and it lets us create really complex molecules with almost surgical precision.
Okay, superpower number 2, total control over temperature. A thin tube has a huge amount of surface area compared to the tiny volume of liquid inside it. And that means heat can get in or out incredibly efficiently. This gives chemists pinpoint control over the reaction temperature like they've never had before.
This efficient heat transfer totally eliminates those dangerous hotspots that can cause runaway reactions. But it also lets chemists do something pretty wild. They can safely heat a solvent way past its normal boiling point, just by keeping it under pressure. For the synthesis of an anti-seizure drug called rufinamide, this technique cut the reaction time from 28 hours down to just 10 minutes. That is more than 100 times faster.
And all of that brings us to the final key superpowers: safety and scalability. Because you're only ever working with a tiny amount of material inside the reactor at any given moment, the risks of handling hazardous or explosive chemistry are just dramatically reduced. And this completely revolutionizes how you think about making more of something.
Right, so here's the crucial point. To make more stuff in a batch system, you have to build a bigger, more dangerous pot, and all your mixing and heating problems just get worse. To scale up and flow, you don't change a thing. You just run more identical, safe reactors side by side. It's a strategy called numbering up, and it means if your chemistry works on a small scale, you already know it's going to work on a huge scale. It's predictable and it's safe.
So why does all of this matter? What's the big deal? Well, this technology is actively transforming one of the most important industries on Earth, pharmaceuticals. It's making the production of life-saving drugs faster, safer, and more efficient. And that means getting new medicines to the people who need them months, sometimes even years, sooner.
From the very beginning of discovering new drug candidates to producing them at a massive scale, flow chemistry is just a perfect fit. It allows for the safe, continuous manufacturing of APIs. That's the core component of our medicines. This approach also reduces waste, which is a huge win for green chemistry. It ensures every single dose is identical, and ultimately, it helps get new drugs to patients way faster.
And this right here brilliantly illustrates the point. Okay, get this. Scientists at Eli Lilly needed a large amount of a cancer drug called prexertibid for their clinical trials. Now, instead of building a massive, dedicated plant, they used a compact, flexible flow chemistry system that literally fit inside a standard laboratory fume hood. By running it continuously, that small system produced 24 kilograms of the drug. That's a perfect example of small-volume, high-impact manufacturing.
So where is all of this headed? If flow chemistry is the advanced hardware for making molecules, what happens when you pair it with some really sophisticated software? Well, you get the automated chemist.
By connecting these modular flow reactors to sensors and artificial intelligence, scientists are creating fully automated, closed-loop systems. We're talking about robotic platforms that can not only perform a chemical reaction, but they can analyze the results in real time and use that data to decide what experiment to run next, optimizing the entire process all on their own.
And listen, this is not science fiction. This is happening right now. Researchers at MIT demonstrated this exact process. First, an AI program planned a route to a drug called sonogagib. Then a robot assembled the necessary flow reactor setup. A powerful optimization algorithm took over, ran a series of experiments, and in just 13 hours, bam, it had found the perfect conditions. This system basically discovered and perfected a drug synthesis with minimal human help.
So that leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. We're moving from a world of manual guesswork in a cauldron to one of automated, intelligent discovery on a chip. So when chemists are empowered with tools that can design and create new molecules almost on demand, what are the big problems we're going to solve next? The possibilities in medicine, energy, and materials, they're truly revolutionary.